Hello and welcome to Crisis What Crisis, a new podcast designed to be a useful field guide as we all try to navigate and come to terms with a dramatically changed world. Whether it's personal, professional or both, crisis is without doubt the new shared experience. I'm Andy Coulson, a former newspaper editor, Downing Street Director of Communications and one-time inmate of HMP Belmarsh. For the last 4 years, I've been putting all my experience, the good and the bad, to use as a strategic advisor to business leaders. And I can tell you that the bad has been just as useful as the good. And that got me thinking that there are plenty of great podcasts out there where you can hear stories of success. There are far fewer where you can benefit from the experience of those whose lives have properly unraveled. So in Crisis What Crisis, I'll be talking to the embattled, shamed, courageous, ruined, damaged, resilient, unlucky and lucky survivors of crisis. Some names will be familiar, some less so, but all our guests will talk about their crises honestly, often with humour, but always in the hope that what they have to share might be useful to anyone facing down their own demons and challenges. Put simply, these are crisis stories worth sharing. If you agree and enjoy what you hear, please do give us a rating and review. That way, even more people will hear them, and that, in the end, is what it's all about. Crisis What Crisis is generously supported by Mindstream, a brilliant company who harness the power of music for personal well-being, whether it be music for meditation, to help focus, sleep, stress relief, yoga and fitness, rejuvenation, even grief and loss. Mindstream is there to improve human performance. I've tried it, it works, and I'd recommend having a listen to the Mindstream catalogue yourself. Just search Mindstream, that's mind with a Y, on Spotify. Thanks again for joining me. My guest today is Frank Warren, one of the world's greatest ever boxing promoters. Bruno, Calzaghe, Ben, Collins, Eubank, Hamed, Khan, Hatton, and of course Tyson Fury. These are all people who owe a deep debt of gratitude to Frank, because it's his genius, his ability to align so many stars in the right way at just the right moment, whilst of course carrying a large lump of the financial risk. It's that skill that created the stage for all of those boxers to realise their dreams. Frank is also an innovator, the man who forced the British Boxing Board of Control to establish what is effectively modern promoting, who could see where British sports entertainment was heading in the late 80s and who built a home for it long before the O2 with the London Arena, who also led the march in taking boxing to bigger audiences outside of terrestrial TV, transforming the sport with pay-per-view, and who is even now finding new ways to revolutionise boxing. But we're here, of course, to talk about crisis and how to get through it, something that Frank knows more than a bit about, because resilience, staying power and grit are as much a part of his DNA as they are of any of those boxers I've just mentioned. A man who's lived the extreme highs and the lows of a life in business and the public eye, who knows what it is to find yourself in the hands of a jury of your peers, and in his case win, and who came within an inch of death when he was shot at point blank range in 1989. And those are just two of the dramas in what has been an astonishing life. Before we start, I should declare an interest. If you listen to the first episode of this second series, in which I banged on about my own crisis, you might remember that I talked about how friends can react in different ways when things go wrong. There are those who run into the fire and there are those who run in the opposite direction. It's been my privilege to have known Frank for the last couple of decades, and I can confirm that he is a run into the fire sort of friend. So with that love in over, welcome to Crisis What Crisis, Frank.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I am good. We're talking, of course, as the crisis that we thought, we were hoping to emerge from has gone back into reverse. New limitations announced by the Prime Minister. They affect everyone, of course, but sport in particular is in pain. I want to talk, though, Frank, if I may, about your resilience. Born in a council house in Islington, your dad was a bookie. You were a very bright lad, passed your 11 plus. Got into grammar school, but then you left at what were you, 14 and a half?
14 and a half, I don't know anymore, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, why is the first question. I've always thought, many conversations over the years, I've always thought to myself, I mean, you took a much more a successful turn, but you would have been a great lawyer. Was that not kind of, on the list of possibilities when you were that kid who just passed his 11 plus and thinking about the future?
No, actually, my first job when I left school, I worked for a solicitor in Holborn called J. Tickle & Co. I lasted there a month. Drove me
Fantastic. How very Dickensian.
Good old Dickensian name, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, I left school when I was 14. It sounds stupid and it was ridiculous to take. I went to quite a good school and I'm not taking the opportunities that it offered to me. But the fact of the matter, I got quite bored with it. And my mum and dad had split up, and I thought maybe took liberties with that, in as much that I started bunking off school quite a bit. I had a girlfriend at the time who was a little bit older than me, so I used to spend a lot of time around there, and I went back to school again, and that was it. So that's the truth of the matter. So right. That was in those days. But for me, it was all. I enjoyed school when I was very young. I really did enjoy going to school, and I did well. And a lot of people didn't think I would do well. I was always in the sort of top 3 of the class. Going to grammar school. I mean, no one from my family ever went to university, and that was like the equivalent of probably going to a university, going to the grammar school. You know what I mean? Back then.
Yeah.
And education for me is quite important. I mean, I'm lucky enough. I do read a lot, and I sort of do take an interest in a lot of things. And I certainly, for me, one of my priorities is to make sure my kids got good educations. They all went to uni, and they all. One of my daughters is a music teacher.
Yeah.
So they've all had an education, which is something I feel that we as all parents should ensure their kids have. And then after that, it's up to them what they're going to do with it. But I did take advantage of it.
But the sort of gene that was strong, very strong in you, even at that age, was the entrepreneurial gene, right? That was there very, very early on.
I'd wash cars, do anything. And when I was about 15, I remember me and my pal who passed away with a virus recently. We used to go Christmas time. We used to go. I can remember going down buying reams of Christmas paper, and we'd put like 5 or 6 sheets together, put them all together so you had all the different colours, put them together, and we used to sell them up Chapel Street Market. Get the money. As we got the money, we go straight into the bookmakers and have a bet. And it was just, but it was all fun, and in the 60s, it was very lively times. It was so. I definitely want to get onto that. But you became a promoter, and you became interested in boxing sort of by accident, didn't you? Yeah. I was always a fan of all sports, but my main passion was football. I managed a football club in my block of flats where I lived. I managed they were called Priory FC. I managed them when I was 16. I remember they played in the Regent's Park Sunday League, and I used to go to a pub. I remember in Holloway Road for the meeting. There's all these blokes there, all these old fellas, all running, all the managers and whatever running the thing. And I was about 13, 14. So I've always, sort of was very interested in sport. And I had a cousin called Johnny Wall. He was quite a good fighter. He turned professional exactly the same time as John Conte. We had another second cousin called Lenny McLean. He was in the movie Lock, Stock and Two Barrels. Both barrels, yeah. And they dedicated the film to him. So Lenny at that time, he used to work on the door of a nightclub. He was always a big fella. He was like, when he was sort of 11, he was the same size, if you know what I mean. He's one of those big kids. Bit of a bully. And I, to be honest, I didn't really like him that much. But my Uncle Bob, who I really looked up to, my dad's brother, I really did look up to him. He went to my Uncle Bob and he said he was going to have this fight against a guy called Roy Shaw. Roy Shaw was the sort of king of unlicensed boxing. So they had it on at this club called Sinatra's with a C,
right,
in Streatham.
Fantastic.
That was my first involvement with Sinatra.
Yeah.
And so we went along as just as punters to watch it. So my uncle and I watched it, and he got absolutely poleaxed. didn't train a day. He hit Roy Shaw once, wobbled him, and then after that, never threw another punch. Just crossed his arms on the ropes and got hit about 50 times and eventually slipped down the ropes, and that was it. My uncle bollocked him in the dressing room. He said, well, why would you let somebody do that to you? Anyway, they eventually made a rematch, had the fight. He won. Then he beat Shaw, knocked him out. And there was a meeting, which I went along to with my uncle. And I'm like a kid there. I was about 22, 23 at the time. And they offered Lenny some really stupid money for another, like for the rubber match.
Yeah.
And I said, what's he want to take that for? I'm sort of butted in. I said, I'll pay him more than that. And that's how I got into promoting.
So, you know, it's a wonderful story, but how does that happen? How does the 20-year-old or 21-year-old kid standing in that room, you know, pull that off?
Well, my uncle just looked at me and it was like, what's what? But I'd said it, and he should have been talking, and I sort of should have said that, and I apologised outside, but I thought, you know, I just said it. So I said, we can do this. I said, don't worry about that. I mean, what did I know?
Paint a picture for me, Frank, of this of this sort of life that you're leading as a bloke in his early 20s, growing up and sort of, you know, finding your way on the streets of London, Soho, you know, Ronnie Scott's, you know, the whole scene in the late 60s and 70s. It must have been an amazing place to be, a properly amazing time.
Well, I loved it. At the time I was doing this, I also was I had a business which was involved with machines. We used to put pool tables and machines into pubs and clubs. And I was very young at the time, 23, and I had a couple of interest in a couple of what we call drinkers, which were, one was an after-hours drinker, which was basically an unlicensed drinking club. It was lively times, and I was, you know, I sort of myself. I was getting good money. I was doing okay. I had a nice car. I had a good, decent life, and all that. And I got married quite young, first marriage, and it was just a real.
But what's driving you? What I'm trying to get at is where does all this come from, right? Because it's an astonishing story of success, even just when we're right at the start of it, by the way. But even here in this point of the story, it's an amazing kind of success. What's driving you? Obviously money, right? As it does, you know, quite reasonably. But there's something else going on. There's something else going on as well, isn't there?
It wasn't money really. And I mean, I love, you know, like now I didn't have any big money, but what do you want where I come? You got your few quid. You wanted to go and get some nice clothes. So and for us was to go and get a suit made to measure in those days. You wanted a car. You wanted to be able to go out at night. And you're buying records. That's how it was. Being out, it was a really good time for unlike it is today for the poor young kids. It was a great time for us. But I just if I got a bit between my teeth, I just went for it. Whatever it was.
Because there must have been some resistance. Right, you're treading on a few toes. Well, I mean, you're that little example you gave, right? You're the bloke in his early 20s who says, "I'll do that."
It's funny. I'm very good at if I get the bit between my teeth and I want to do it, I've in most cases got it over the line because I won't give up on it. You know, I keep pushing and pushing till it happens. And sometimes I don't look at the detail as much as I should. And that's been one of my problems, and trusted a couple of people I should have done. But, you know, you've all got, you know, you've got your good points and your bad points in life, you know, and I'm as a bookmaker's son, I like to bet. I don't bet like I used to. I used to sort of bet quite a bit. I used to go to the dog racing. Me and Mickey Droy used to be the Chelsea captain. We went to school together, and him used to go to the dogs.
But your business, right? I mean, there will be people listening to this who hopefully, you know, be people who love boxing, but there will be people who know, you know, only know what they see on the TV. The job of a promoter, right, is partly a bet, obviously, right? You're constantly kind of trying to manage risk. Is it that element that really drew you to boxing specifically? Because that you know, that kind of dynamic, if you like, of being the guy in the centre, making it work, but also with this big lump of risk. Did you love the risk? Do you love the risk?
I do. I do. I think I do sometimes live on the edge. I do that. which I still do. But I think the thing about it was when I started off talking about these, they called them unlicensed shows. They were licensed. They were licensed by the GLC back then, but they weren't licensed by the Board of Control. But taking the board on and doing all that, I weren't looking to get a career out of boxing. It just happened. And because they kept putting obstacles in my way, then I sort of fought it. And the more I fought it, then I got more sort of seduced by the game because it's a fantastic thing. You know, I'm a kid from a council flats, Priory Green Estate in Islington, just off Pentonville Road, and this where I've gone from doing that and the people I've met in my life. I've been blessed. I've been the most luckiest, and it's been amazing. You know, the journey that I've had.
Let's talk about resilience for a minute. What's your view, Frank? Does it come from your environment? How much of it, this whole nature nurture bit, which is often a point of discussion on this podcast, where do you sit on it? When you look, and we're going to get into some of your resilience, but where do you think it comes from? One or other combination?
I think resilience comes from your heart. I think because that's it. It's in you. It's either in you or it isn't in you. And it depends what, I mean, look at, what happened with you. The circumstances you find yourself sometimes are totally alien to where, what is happening? Why is this happening to me? I've never, this wasn't part of the plan. For me, I've always come from quite a confrontational situation. My family were well known in Islington. They were quite, it's like a macho environment. So there was no backing down from anybody. It was just never that just never happened. And I suppose in some ways I've taken that. I mean, people say that I'm very litigious, and I think and I was certainly against a lot of the newspapers because there was a lot of stuff written about me which was untrue, and that was put right. But the reason I did it, because had it been like I was in my younger days, I'd probably gone around and punched them on the nose, because that's how what it was.
That's how things were done. Right.
Yeah, but you're obviously you're growing up, you're living in a different world and so forth. So I just don't, I've never, if I feel I'm right about something, sometimes to my detriment, I will push it. And if I'm under fire, it's a funny thing, I get a big rush of adrenaline when things are against me.
Yeah.
And I seem to, and that rush of adrenaline makes me really focused and gives me a clear mind to what I'm going to do. I don't panic about things. I can be right on what I'm thinking about, I've been in some situations over the year, but I can focus, and I can, it's I don't know what it is. It's like, maybe it's like, it might stem back to like my mum and dad. They're quite a tempestuous relationship. He was there, he was gone, they were arguing. It got to the stage where when they were arguing, you was waiting for, when they made it up, then they made up. And I was always waiting for it to fall out again.
Yeah.
So you're always waiting for something to go wrong.
Yes.
And when it went wrong, then you went in. And I think maybe some of the resilience come from that, in that living there. My sister, my brother, my younger brother, my youngest brother who committed suicide. He wasn't born. He wasn't born when all this was happening. But it was quite a. It was really, really sometimes very tough, because as I say, you wait for the bad times, but you become used to it. It just becomes a way, because you don't know any different. And sometimes you think that's what a normal relationship is, or at the time.
And your feeling, Frank, absolutely, is that you've carried that into your. You've carried that.
Yeah, I think I have done. I think that's been part of me. It's like when things are going well, I don't worry about things, but when things are going well, I'm always sort of thinking, well, something's going to happen in a minute, and we'll have to deal with it.
It's not a coincidence, is it? Obviously, the boxing is full of characters who have had troubled backgrounds, difficult lives that have driven them on. It's a common factor. Certainly has been over the years. Still is, in your view. Is that the kind?
I think there are a lot of single parent more these days. There are some single parent families, but there are also a lot of close families. Mums and dads are involved with their kids and their boys and girls these days fight. Fighters, it's funny, you think they're all the same, but they're all different. They've all got different personalities, obviously. I mean, for me, Tyson Fury, in that fight he had, when he won the world, the fight before he won the world title, he got robbed, by the way. And he was well in front that last round. When he got hit, and he got caught this tremendous punch by Deontay Wilder, and he hit the canvas. And I got up and I thought, it's all over. I mean, everybody in the place, it's all over. Wilder's team are all, jumping, going up into the ring. And he got up. Referee counted about 6 or 7. He got up. And it was like the Terminator. That little spark in his eye, or the Robocop, whatever it is, when he sparked. And he got up. Not only did he get up, he was winning the fight at the end. He was winning the round at the end. And I spoke to him about it. And I said to him, Tyson, I thought he was gone. And whatever. He said, no. He said, remember the referee came in the dressing room and he said to me, if any of you guys get in trouble, if you get clipped, if you go on the floor, I'm going to tell you to get up. I'm going to take you walk 2 paces or 3 paces to the right or to the left. I'm going to look in your eyes, and then I'm going to decide whether I'm going to allow you to fight on. And he said, I was lying there and I couldn't feel my legs. He said, I never thought I would be falling all over the place and the referee would stop it. So he said, I'll just wait to get some feeling in my legs. Yeah. And I'm thinking about resilience. Jesus Christ, not only the resilience, the presence of mind,
to make that calculation. Yeah.
That you're going to do that. That's something, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this is, we all have our pressure and whatever, but this is somebody's hit you on the chin, you're lying on the floor, your mind's all over. And that was tremendous what he did and how he did that. So he's another one of those amazing characters that come out of boxing. And there've been some amazing guys down over the years, come through and shown tremendous resilience to do what they do. And it's a situation where you're bearing your soul. You're in the ring. There's just 2 guys in there. You're in front of a massive audience. You're on TV going around the world in a big fight. And you're bearing your soul.
Can you spot the reverse? Can you spot, what? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that kind of moment comes along that you're going to be the guy who gets up again.
I've seen, look, anybody gets into the ring of brave, anybody to do that. But it's how brave you want to be. Yeah. And, I have seen, I'm not going to say any names, but I've seen guys in there who basically, shouldn't have gone in there in the first place because they obviously didn't fancy it.
Yeah.
It has happened.
And maybe didn't even know it themselves.
No, yeah, maybe you may be right. Maybe they didn't know it, or they didn't want to admit it to themselves. But even if you think about it, even if you do feel that way and you're still getting in there, you still got to be brave to do that.
And your relationship with your fighters, you've been, as I said right at the start, responsible for untold success for an untold number of great boxers. Not all of them are necessarily been grateful for it, Frank. That or they have very short memories. Let's put it that way. How do you? You don't need to be specific about anyone, but how have you sort of managed that over the years? Because for most people, you're making a lot of money too, right? But the sort of the way that some boxers have over the years behaved, and perhaps also the people around them, has caused you untold stress. How have you sort of managed that? I mean, what's the process? What process goes on in your head?
It's very that can be very stressful. When you get these situations happen. Most of the time, when I can think of, I'll just name names. I'm going to want nothing to worry about in saying it. Nassim Hamid. I never fell out with Naz. It was his brother who caused the problems. And Naz, to his credit, done a couple of interviews. I know one was in the last few years on Sky saying he wished he never left. But when I see him, we get on very well now. Ricky Hatton. I never fell out with Ricky Hatton. I never had a crossword with him. But his father, I fell out with, and therefore fell out with Ricky. And me and Ricky get on really well now. And he eventually fell out with his father. He says himself, his best night in his boxing career is when he fought Costa Zoo, which is the fight I got him and won the world title. Yeah. Nigel Benn, somebody got in the middle of that, blew down his ear, and he listened to all the rubbish, and we had a massive fallout. And he came back. He actually came back with me, and he lost all his money. Someone relieved him of his money. he came back to me, and what I didn't do, which I've learnt now, you don't want to get between father and son or between families. I would never do that, but I'll do it now. And if I feel there's a problem, I'll ask the fighter direct.
Yeah,
because I'm not going to give listen, they may be saying, well, I want to get away from Warren, I don't want to be in there. And fair enough, that's how it's going to be. But I want to know that whatever the reason is, it's for the right reason, not through what someone's putting in their head.
Do you carry a grudge? Do you carry a grudge?
I can carry it. I try not to, but I have, and I'm a big believer what goes around comes around. I really do believe that's happening. I believe everything evens out at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It will even out. It will come back one way or another.
A conversation about difficult boxers that you've met can't finish until I mention Mike Tyson. Really. Who was in his own way a genius, right? In the boxing ring. I don't know whether you would use that word, whether that's the right word. Certainly talented. But you fell out pretty spectacularly with him. How did you feel about that process?
Well, I fell out for a third party. I mean, we did a show, but first of all, it's my fault. It's my fault what happened, in as much that I shouldn't have got involved in the Mike Tyson business.
Yeah,
but I did. Sky wanted to do the fight. They wanted him on board. Sam Chisholm, who was late Sam Chisholm, we got to do it. Let's do it. I was working with King at the time. And then he came back. Then he left King. And then the late Jay Larkin, he was the vice president of Showtime in America. Great bloke. He asked me if I'd put the fight on over here, bring Tyson over here. So I did. First time he came over, no problems. He was great. And then he went into a jeweller's, walked out of the jeweller's with an invoice for about, I can't remember the exact amount, Graft, it was Graft's jewellers. Walked out with an invoice for about, I think it might have been 2 million, something like that, 1.5 million, 2 million. And strolled just so we're clear, strolled into the jewellers, and on the nod took away 2 million quid's worth of jewellery. Yeah, and took it out, and roughly that amount. It's in my book, and my book comes out in November, so that's just going to be in there. But so he walked out with a jewellery, and that, I rang as he's in there. I said, "Listen, he's buying a lot of jewellery here, so just to let you know." And they said, "Don't worry, we'll take it off his purse." And he was into them for a lot of money at Showtime. That was that. They never paid the bill, and quite rightly, the jewellers wanted to get paid. And they kept ringing me, and I was ringing the States, and they're telling me, "Don't worry, it'll be sorted. We're going to do another fight here. Let's pay it out the next thing." I'm passing that information on. Then there was a fight we pulled out. But when he came back the second time, he was just awful. I mean, he was awful, beyond awful. And it was like, he was petulant. It was just aggressive. It was a totally different scenario.
And the bill still hadn't been paid.
The bill hadn't been paid still. And he'd gone into the jewellers. And the reason he got into the jewellers because there was a girl in the jewellers who he'd met, and he was just basically showing off to her the first time.
Yeah.
And she's going to get the commission. He's gone to look for her when he's gone in there. They fired her or she left or whatever. And cut a long story short, he got pissed about it. I don't know this at the time. And anyway, I get a call. Someone said to me, Mike's not happy. I said, I come up and see him. What's the problem? So I go up to the hotel. Next minute, it's off at all meetings. I'm just standing there talking, and he took a swing at me. We didn't take a swing. He actually caught me. Right. So we went having a big commotion in the room. There's a lot of people in the room.
Can we pause there just for a second? Mike Tyson hit you.
Yeah.
There aren't many people who can kind of tell that story outside of a boxing ring.
And I didn't expect it, by the way. I wasn't even looking to be prepared for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Cheap shot.
It was a cheap shot. And I got up.
Yeah.
Went over, got up. And it was all pandemonium. Anyway, it was crazy. It was all madness in the room.
Yeah.
But when I say it's my fault, I should have known. I should have pulled out of that situation from the start. I should have got involved.
Do you mind if we go back to the hotel room just very briefly?
Go on.
You've got up, knowing you as I do. Something tells me that you wouldn't have said, "You shouldn't have done that, Michael."
I shall be speaking to you later. Something tells me that was not your reaction. Am I right?
Well, it went on. It was a bit more, and he was like a lunatic. And anyway, it all ended as such. Yeah. And now you talk about how was that going to be sorted out? I was absolutely fuming, as you can imagine.
Yeah,
fuming with everybody involved. I remember the lawyer, Ken Hirschman, who was at Showtime, he said, he wanted to call the police. I said, no. I said, I'm not going to call that police. He said, this is terrible. I remember, and he owed Showtime, Mike Tyson, about $25 million, apparently, allegedly. Mm. And I said to him, no, I don't want to do that. I said, I'll sort it out, don't worry. And anyway, cut a long story short, all the newspapers said I had my jaw broken, my ribs were broken. That's all bullshit. Nothing was broken at all. Yeah. In my eye, I just had like a burst blood vessel, like a red eye.
Yeah.
That was it. And he fought. He had his fight. Showtime got some of their money back, and I made sure that he paid for what he did. Where it hurt him. And he went berserk after the fight. The police actually ran him out of town. He made him straight go to Gatwick Airport, and they got him out of town, country.
I mean, when you think back on just that anecdote, right? When you look back on that story as you're telling it, are you sort of chuckling to yourself inside?
Yeah.
Or can you still feel yourself as you felt then?
No, I'm annoyed with myself. I was annoyed that the person who called me didn't mark my card.
Right.
Because I'd have gone up there anyway. Wouldn't have stopped me going up there, but I want to know what I'm walking into. Yeah. And I'm walking in there like nothing. It wasn't, nothing. Yeah. Next minute, it's like crazy stuff. And he was mad. He was a bully. He was a terrible bully, Mike Tyson. He was the bully who got beaten by bullies. I mentioned earlier about Holyfield.
Yeah.
And Buster Douglas. They beat him because he couldn't intimidate him. He couldn't bully him. And years later, done that. And years later, it takes time sometimes to do things. Years later, he was fighting again, and they wanted to put a fight on. They wanted to put this guy called Kevin McBride in, Irish guy, and they wanted to sell the rights to Sky. And I talked to people doing it. I said, "Don't do that. Put him in with Danny Williams, and that's an English guy, a British guy, and I can do the deal. We can do a better deal for the TV. That'll appeal more to them." And cut a long story short, I said to Danny Williams, when you fight this fella, I said, for 2 or 3 rounds, this is going to be like World War II. In a day. Yeah. You're going to get everything thrown at you. I said, get through it. I said, I'm telling you, you'll knock him out.
Yeah.
And that's what he did.
Can we go to November 1989 and the Broadway Theatre in Barking? The night you were shot. If you don't mind, Frank, are you happy just to talk us through kind of what happened that night? You arriving, you think for a regular night of boxing, and you step outside your car.
Yeah, go outside the car. I heard a bang, and I turned around. I thought it was a motorbike backfiring, and then I heard a click, and I looked up, and there's somebody's there with a mask on. Just had a mask across his face, and I thought myself, I thought it was a joke to start with, and I could see, but he was shaking, and he was just, and I heard a click again, and nothing happened, and he was probably about 8 foot away from me, just too far to close a gap or anything, and so next minute, bang, and I felt a pain I've actually felt it in my chest, but it actually. My ribs, but it actually gone through my chest. It's only the angle I was at. Otherwise, it had gone through my heart and it went through my lung and come out. Mm. And then he ran. Well, I didn't see him run. I could hear a kerfuffle. And my partner at the time was a barrister called John Bottress. He's next minute I heard it. I always remember his words. He went, "What the fuck are you doing?" And he jumped on him and wrestled him to the floor. Mm. Very brave. I mean, very brave. And that was it. And I was sort of losing my breath. I was gurgling in my throat because of the blood from my lungs. And as luck had it, ambulances were on strike at that time.
Right.
So I got bundled into the back of an old paddy wagon. Police van was there. They chucked me in the back, and they were doing like a 14-point turn up the curb. Every time they're bumping over, I'm going, oh.
So the first shot, just to recap, the first shot sort of misses you. As a result, you hear the bang, you change the angle of your body, and it's only because you did that the second bullet goes through you rather than goes through the sort of at an angle rather than through your heart. You're an inch away, right? I mean, you lost half a lung, you lost part of your ribs, but you were an inch away.
Yeah.
At what point, are you kind of consciously aware of what's going on? At what point, when you're in a really kind of clear moment of crisis there, when did your sort of consciousness of what was going on kick in?
I was in a crisis when I was gurgling blood.
Yeah.
No, and then I thought it was even worse crisis when I'm in the back of a police van and they're telling me the ambulances are on strike. And there's no paramedics. And I'm in a worse crisis. So I get to the hospital, and I'm on a trolley, and as they're wheeling me along, because you're looking up the lights will flashing past you. And I'm going in as a nurse. She said to me, "Don't worry, Frank, it'll be all right," and all that stuff. And I remember my Uncle Bob was with me, and I said, "Don't let them knock me out." I said, because I felt I had to keep awake.
Right.
I said, "Don't let them knock me out," but I had to. And they took me in the thing, and that was it. Next minute, I woke up. Whenever I woke up, and they told my wife Susan, my wife Susan, they told her that I had a 50-50 chance of making it. And they whizzed her, they took her down in a police car to the hospital, and I woke up and she was in the room, and that was it. She was in the room treading on the oxygen pipe.
Honestly, only you can crack jokes about that.
Yeah, so
I mean, look, I know that your inclination is always to kind of brush it off to your great credit, but I mean that is it's a crisis story like not many others, right? And at what point? Let's go forward then, if not in the back of the van. Let's go forward to the hospital bed after the operation. Just try and give me a bit of a sense of how you're trying to make sense of it. How are you coping?
How am I coping? How am I coping? Well, I was obviously very weak and so forth on there. It was not so much then, because you're sort of still groggy. I'm on morphine and all that morphine drip and whatever they give me, and so you're pretty much out of it. It was a couple of days later. And then they started showing me all the newspapers and the things that were being said, and some of it was just such bullshit. I mean, such rubbish that they were coming out with. And my concern was we built London Arena, an arena in London, 12,500 seat arena in Docklands. Everyone said it's a disaster area. No, who's going to go to Docklands? Especially all the newspapers were saying that, and most of the base down there now. It was tough times. And my problem was that we'd have done a deal with a syndication of banks who were going to take a stake in the arena. And if you remember, or you may not remember, but back then the interest rate went to about 16%. We were paying about 4% over base rate back then. So it's very expensive. We hit all our targets as regarding what we were doing with the events we were putting on. But the problem became and was, I knew how are we going to keep these banks on board? I've been shot, and it all just fell away. And that was for me was the crisis. The crisis was now. I'd given personal guarantees for about 14 million quid. I had, it was my family, the kids. Susan was pregnant at the time, our youngest Henry. So it was all that was for me was the worry. I mean, I was. In fact, the way comes there. I'm okay. I'm angry. I want to check. I want to try and find out who it was. I've got my uncle there, my dad there. They're both passed away now. They want to go. They're determined to go and sort it out. And I'm saying no. Police in there asking me what's what, and I didn't know it was at that stage. I got then it was just hard work, and then I've got just everything going on. In the midst of that, I've got like that. I don't know, about 200 telegrams and letters and flowers are all coming from friends and people you wouldn't even expect. I mean, it was very me, I was really pleased, and it's touching some of it that came in, and I was quite shocked really, and that sort of lifted me quite a bit. And the fact was, 10 days later, I was back at work. I'd lost about 3 stone, and the press were camped outside my house. And we thought the only way to get rid of that was to have a press conference, kill it, get rid of it, which we did. Yeah. And I was back at work. And I had no choice. I'm back at work. I was weak. I didn't feel up to it. I was trying to keep all the balls in the air. And it was just, and that was the crisis. I remember going into the arena. I remember people, as I went in, people working there, give us a clap and all that. But it was, it was all their jobs. It was everybody invested in it. Our own, our family money, and everything was just on a knife edge, and the banks did pull away. The syndication of banks pulled out of it, which was a big killer. What I should have done then, I should have, with the benefit of hindsight, I should have actually put it into administration.
Yeah,
I held on for about a year, and I shouldn't have done that. I should have gone into administration and just bought it back out. And it would have been okay, and I could have done a deal with the banks. They needed us at the time. We were putting the events on, we were delivering them. We had Pavarotti there. Sinatra was due to play there.
Yeah,
I mean, he got in touch. Are you okay, or is it? They all thought it's go ahead. I said no, everything's business as normal. We're going to go on with this. So
you're in your hospital bed, in your pajamas. You've survived an attempt on your life.
Yeah.
You're fighting to save your business, and you're taking a call from Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, him and his people, yeah.
Only Frank Warren. No one listening to this, please God, is going to face that kind of situation, right? That I've just described. But there are lots of people who face multifaceted crisis, right? In other ways, and it might be health plus. For a lot of people, a health crisis could easily lead to a financial crisis that could impact their family.
Yeah.
Essentially, what you're describing. What's your advice then, as someone who's gone through and survived that? What's your advice on how you approach a sort of multifaceted crisis like that, Frank?
It depends what sort of person you are, really. I mean, some of the stuff I did, I shouldn't have done. As I said, benefit of hindsight, I should have looked at going in a different direction. You've got to park your ego. London Arena was a success story, but the only thing it couldn't do was the debt that it had, which was the problem. You've got to just be true to yourself. But the most important thing is you've got to make sure that your family is safe. Because that's the most important thing. You've got to make sure that your family, you're protecting them, that they can, that you keep that unit together, and you work hard to keep them as safe as possible from all the problems.
Let's just finish the arena story, because it sort of set off a chain of events as well, didn't it? While you're recovering from that night. As you just described, it immediately led to problems for the arena. That then leads to other problems that in turn leads to you, sitting in a courtroom in May 2000 in Southwark Crown Court, waiting for a verdict from your jury, something that you and I both know what that feels like. You've been on trial for tax evasion, charges that you vehemently denied and defended yourself against, very aggressively and very clearly. But you were prepared for the worst that day, in that moment that we both know what that feels like. You were prepared for the worst, and just kind of because you're in the hands of other people. How did that feel for you?
Well, it's out of your control, isn't it? But I'd much rather have been in their hands than in the hands of a judge. Because if it had been the judge, I would have been gone.
Yeah,
I know that. I've done, showed up my little hold on.
Yeah.
Which, preparing for the worst. But I keep mentioning about my dad and my uncle. They were there every day of the trial. Yeah. My uncle said all the way through, he said, not just to lift my spirits, he actually said, this is, don't you worry, you're out of this.
Yeah. Well, you were acquitted after 20 minutes.
Yeah, they went out for 20 minutes of jury, and that was it. And found the other guy guilty. And I was not guilty. And they all come up to me, the jury as well, all shook my hand. You know, all these things going on relatively in a short space of time.
Yeah.
You know, few things going on. And it was quite a lot on our plate. But I was trying, each time you recovered from something, then another thing hit me.
Yeah.
But it was what it was.
So we talked about your state of mind and how you're handling it kind of, you know, as it's happening. You know, either one of those things that we've just discussed in isolation would have, you know, most people would struggle to have coped with, right? And you were able to deal with all of them, right? Layer after layer after layer, and not just deal with them, then emerge with this state of mind. Do you know what? Off we go again, and bigger and better, and we're just going to go again, yeah. Right? Now, where does that come from, Frank? So if we go right back to the beginning of your story, where you're this lad who just feels that he's just got this sort of sense of urgency and this entrepreneurial spirit and a bit of kind of, don't you tell me what I can and can't do in my life. You've gone through this unbelievable set of experiences, and that's still the primary kind of voice in your head.
I think it's when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I was a skinny kid. I was like fag paper. There was nothing on me. And I remember having fights with big kids. If anyone bullied me, I'd try and fight them back. By hook or by crook. I'd have to, you know, I can remember, you know, crying with temper if I couldn't get them, you know. And I suppose it's something that I had inside me. Naturally, I don't know. But I don't think about let's get up and go on again. I just get on with it. And I think, you know, I've been lucky with my family. You know, with Susan, my wife, and we've kept everything from the kids. The kids, I mean, I like to believe it's a pretty normal life from them because we shielded them a lot from all the stuff that's going down.
Yeah,
but it's just
difficult to do when it's so in the public eye.
It's horrible, isn't it? It's horrible, you know. And kids and other kids, they read this stuff and whatever's being said, and they can be nasty. We all know that to each other. That's just how kids are sometimes. But it weren't about, you know, I'm going to get up and move. I just was doing it anyway. I can remember whilst we was in court, I can remember lunchtimes, especially lunchtimes, I would be, some lunchtimes, a fella comes out of my office telling them what they got to do. He said, right, we've got a problem here or something's happening. I said, well, let's get on with it and do it. When I get out of here, I'll ring up, let's deal with it this evening. And so I can remember a few of those things going, because life has to go on. You've got to go on. You can't just, your life doesn't just, you can't let it just stop. You have to go on. You get so immersed in it. And, you know, and it's not just the court case, it's all the stuff leading up to it, all the going into conferences and reading.
That's exactly right. It's all the stuff outside of that's just so exhausting.
And do you know what it all is? It's two things. It's exhausting and it's all negative. When it's really, you know, right on you sort of thing, for want of a better phrase, or phrase from when I was a kid, it's on you.
Yeah.
I think it's, you know, that's when I think I'll get a sort of bit of clarity. Real clarity.
That's where that focus for you kind of kicks in. But what about when that adrenaline falls away? How do you manage that process? And have you had help with it? Have you kind of understood it better than you used to? Are you,
Yeah, I did. I mean, I did therapy for a few years, and I did that. And I did that, and I don't know if it helped. It helped me understand parts of me.
Yeah.
You know, making me understand. You know, I wonder. And now I know, why did I do that? I must be stupid. Why did I do? And why did I say? And it made me think. It made me. It did help me in that way. But I had to stop because I'm quite an addictive personality. I get addicted to things. I mean, I'll even finish a book that I'm stupid enough and addicted enough to read a book that I don't like, and I'll finish it instead of saying, "What am I wasting, you know, my life on this? I'll read it, hoping it get better." or something. It's great. Yeah. And I have that sort of that personality about things, and I felt even with the therapy, I was just becoming a bit addictive, and I just stopped it. I stopped that.
Did you feel you got what you needed from it?
I think it helped me understand a few things. I mean, it didn't, you know, it wasn't. What's the word for it? Or the phrase? It wasn't. it didn't change my life, but it changed in some ways how I thought and made me, I reflected on a lot of the things and wish I'd have done some things much. I'm trying to be on a personal side of my life. Wish I'd have done things differently.
Yeah, you don't talk about it, but I'm going to do it for you. You are a huge supporter of a number of charities. One cause is particularly close to your heart, Deborah, a brilliant charity that supports sufferers, usually children of EB, a rare condition that causes the skin to blister and tear at the sort of slightest touch. It's a harrowing condition, and you've raised vast sums in support of it. Have you found that perspective has been important to you in your own crisis? That to cope with, your problems, you have to realise that others have it so much worse. Deborah and the people that you support in it are great examples of it. How important has perspective been to you?
Look, with Deborah, it's been very difficult. I have to say this because, I first got involved. There was a documentary called The Boy Whose Skin Fell Off. Johnny, he died. I went to Downing Street to a function. That's where I met him. He was a tremendous character, only a young lad. And he died on a train going home. It was awful. Anyway, I got involved with a charity. I was asked to get involved. I got involved. And you meet the parents, you meet some of the children, and I've got to tell you something. What we've all been through is nothing, because nothing could be worse than looking, having your child being ill in any form, especially such a harrowing condition as EB. It's just dreadful. It takes some of these youngsters 2 hours a day to get ready, you have to put the cream on their body, get them same in the evening and so forth. So it's just awful for the parents, and you can imagine the pressure they're under. Plus, you see some of these youngsters, they lose their fingers, they blister. Sometimes they blister even from inside their mouths and so forth. So it's just a dreadful thing, and I think that for anyone to have that, a court case, some of the things that I've been through and what other people have been through, I think is nothing, because you're doing that on a daily basis, fearing and praying, hoping and praying that there'll be some cure be found for that to help your child, so that your child may live and have a life. It's just awful. And you know what? And what will cure this is money. Money will cure it. They keep throwing money at it. It will cure it. It doesn't get any. At the time I got no help from the government or anything. Everything, all the monies that were raised through functions and charitable donations. Some really good people.
You've done an. I know you don't talk about it, but you've done an amazing job with them. You've also, you touched on it earlier, Frank, right at the start of the conversation. So I'll mention it briefly. But you've also had calls for perspective from a personal point of view. With your brother, Mark, who, as you mentioned earlier, very sadly took his own life. I don't want to dwell on it, but when you sort of chart the crises in your life, that's another layer that most people would not have to cope with, right? Loss in that sense. How did you manage that? How did you cope with that moment?
What happened? I was in bed, and Susan came up. She took the call. She said, "It's your brother." And I thought it was my brother Robert, but it was Mark. And Mark was he was schizophrenic. He smokes a lot of weed when he was young, and that's why I'm against legalising cannabis. Yeah. I think it's a drug that I don't know how anybody can support legalising it. It may help the police do it, but all it'll do is create yet another epidemic. Smoking that, if it don't lead to something else, it certainly affects the mind. And he was in a terrible. He's bad. It was just awful. We went there. My dad was there. My mum, that sounds terrible. My mum had died, and thankfully she weren't there when it happened. The dad was there. We all went down, and when the police took us to a hotel which was nearby to tell us we couldn't. He jumped off of the fourth floor of a the flats that he lived in.
Hmm.
It was just awful, and I couldn't. I can't even explain how I felt at the time. It was just such a shock, and it was awful. What I felt guilty. I felt guilty because I didn't give him the time I should have given him. It was a horrible thing. I'm sort of busy most of the time, but if I got a phone call from him, it seemed a lot of the times I was with someone, I was in a meeting, and I said, I'll call you back. Well, I could call him back, but it was always much later. And I think of those moments when I should have given him a bit of time. I don't know if it made any difference. I helped him in other ways. Obviously, he got some treatment in the Priory. We got him in there for a while and helped him out financially. But sometimes it's not just money. It's not about money. It's about giving you time. And I did. And to be honest, I didn't give him the time I should have done.
If you don't mind me saying. It's probably not my place to say it, but I mentioned earlier that you're a run into the fire friend. I have absolutely no doubt at all that you were a run into the fire brother. You were dealing with someone who very sadly had a whole range of different issues, didn't he? And has it left you feeling about? You mentioned your views on drugs. How's it left you feeling more broadly on the kind of conversation that's going on around mental health now that has changed pretty dramatically over the course of the last decade? We're talking about these things much more openly now. We're talking them in a much more, this podcast is a tiny little example where we're having a conversation that is hopefully going some way towards exploring some of these issues. You presumably think that's a good thing, that conversation should continue and there should be more of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Tyson Fury, he's well documented his mental issues, and he was taking drugs and so forth. It's a terrible thing, and there are a lot of it's hidden away. A lot of people don't own up to it or admit that they have issues and problems. As for drugs, I mean, as you know, I like the finer things in life. I like a glass of wine. I like the food. Now, I've never taken a drug. I've never done it. All my friends, all of my mates when I was young, all of them, in those days some of them were popping pills or taking sulfate and doing all the things that
Is that because you were self-aware enough about your addictive personality?
Yeah, I didn't like the. I really did not like. I never did it anyway. Never appealed to me at all. Never appealed to me, and I'm pleased I never did it. And a lot of my mates, people who I knew when I grew up, so many of them died through it. A lot of them, all of us, started, puffing, and then went on to something else. And so many of them, I mean, a lot of them, I'm talking probably about 15 or 16 of the kids I grew up were dead through drugs.
Yeah.
Bad habits, bad habits. So it's an issue that we just don't, we're just not. I don't know how we deal with it. I mean, I don't know what you do.
Well, the start point is talking. Start point has to be talking about.
Everybody's, but you know what? I think it touches everybody's life. Everybody knows someone who's got a problem with a friend or a relative and it's stemmed from drug abuse.
So we talked about perspective. We talked about family, and the importance of Susan, your amazing wife, and your kids. What about those other less sort of scientific coping mechanisms? You mentioned it briefly there, but a good bottle of wine, a sense of humour, a love of music. There is no one that I have in my life in any way, shape, or form who is able to steer me towards good music in the way that you can. For that, sincere thanks. On the face of it, superficial things, but they're also, I joke about it. There were moments in the middle of my mess that I'd get a WhatsApp message from you saying, have a listen to this. And it would be some fantastic kind of cover version of a song you knew I loved from the sort of 70s. That was, and it's a tiny little thing. And then for the next 3.5-4 minutes, I've got a smile on my face. Do you put proper store by those kind of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really do. I mean, I'm a Mac. I'm always going. I'm not at the moment, like not people. I'm always going to concerts. I love music, and I do. I, I'm always looking for something, some old stuff, which leads you on to new stuff. And
yeah,
I love the music, and I just love, well, I'm 68 now, so I want to enjoy myself. While I've
but not just the enjoyment, but also the kind of actual headspace that it gives you, that the kind of release.
Yeah, of course it does.
You're a believer, aren't you?
In the world, isn't it? It's the best. I love it when I'm on my own in the car and I can put the music on and play, a little bit louder. Sometimes, on my own, I can blast it up and crank it up. I just love
that. Well, we've got some examples of it during the course of this conversation. Humour is clearly, you believe in the healing power of a sense of humour. I don't think we need to get that confirmed. It's perfectly clear. What's your view, Frank, of just as we finish up? What's your view of the government right now? How are you feeling? Because you're a very astute political analyst. We've talked a lot about politics over the years. How are you feeling about the government's, just to change the subject, how are you feeling about our government's performance right now?
Well, that noise you can hear at the moment is the rain. It's like a monsoon.
Oh, really? Right.
Yeah. I'll do nothing about that. How do I feel about the government? I'm a little bit at a loss of the four nations. I thought it was one nation. I know we're not, but where is that fighting spirit that got our dads and our grandfathers through two wars when we was one nation all pulling together? You've got, up in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon's, she's got her new lockdown. She's got her lockdown in. Boris is doing a different thing. Wales and so on. I get worried about it and the message it sends out through me. And is it about scoring points rather than, getting us as Great Britain? I know some people don't want to belong to Great Britain, but the ones who, instead of keeping us as a nation, keep us that fighting spirit that gets us through. I don't like all the negativity. What I think the government has, what they set out to do when this happened back in March, was to ensure that the hospitals weren't overwhelmed, that the NHS could cope. And I think they managed to do that. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of things they could have done better, but it was a government who were elected on the strength of Brexit. I was a Remainer, but they were elected on the strength of Brexit. They weren't, the cabinet that was put in place wasn't there put in place for a pandemic. That came sort of left field, didn't it?
Of course.
I don't think any countries, as much as they say they've had it, I know Sweden has more than anybody because obviously they chose a different sort of a path than everyone else did by allowing people to still mix. But then again, they're not a densely populated country. Everybody's looks like they're going into some form of lockdown again.
Where do you think the mindset of the average working man and woman in this country is right now?
I think they're supportive. I think the average sensible person is supportive of and would even go for a more stricter lockdown. I think they're more supportive.
Now, you were inaugurated into the Boxing Hall of Fame in June 2008. Big day for you and the family. But no gong as yet, Frank. Truth is, there haven't been many awards given to boxers over the years, never mind promoters. Only one night, Sir Henry Cooper. My view, we touched on this earlier in terms of the sort of political attitude towards boxing. My view, having been inside for a brief while, I'm referring to Downing Street, by the way, is that just to clarify, is that there's I think there's a prejudice against boxing. Now, as an Arsenal fan, this will hurt you, Frank, but you are the Alex Ferguson, the Sir Alex Ferguson of boxing, and just as deserving of a knighthood, in my view. So I'm not asking you to respond, but you just need to know that the campaign starts here. Frank Warren, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom today. I really appreciate it. Before you go, as we do with all our guests, I'm going to ask you for your 3 crisis cures. So as you know, these are 3 things. Can't be another person. Can't be a sort of process. We've covered that during the course of the conversation, but 3 things that you've always sort of turned to in the more difficult moments.
To be home.
Yeah.
To be in my house. To be home.
Yeah.
A bit like Desert Island Disc. I think I would, and as it can't be a person, it'd have to be a photo album of my family.
Yeah.
All my family, because that's, for me, is what drives me.
Yes.
Is them and my music.
Give me a track.
And, God,
I know you've done Desert Island Discs, and I know that you came away thinking, "Oh God, I wish I could do that again," and make some other choice. I'm only going to give you one. I'm only going to give you one song.
It's a funny thing. I've got so many. It depends what mood I'm in for music. But I suppose what would I? I'm like,
if you're fed up, you're driving home, and you're gonna put a bit of music on in the car. What's the track that is guaranteed to lift your mood?
I tell you what lifts my mood every time is the Temptations, the way you do the things you do.
Great tune. I knew you.
You thought I was going to say a Sinatra one.
I knew you'd pick a good one. No, I knew you'd pick a good one. Frank, it's fantastic. Thanks so much for giving us so much time and being, just so brilliant. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure, mate. As always with you, you know that.
Speak soon.
Good.
Thanks for listening to Crisis What Crisis. Do feel free to send us your feedback. You'll find our contact details and our show notes giving you the key insights from our guests at crisiswhatcrisis.com. There are more useful conversations on the way, so please do subscribe. And if you like what you hear, give us a rating and a review. It really helps. Thanks again.